The big pharma influence, corruption, and death toll travels around the world, penetrating many countries including Denmark. Here's Dr. Peter Goche briefly explaining.
My name is Peter Goche. I'm a director of the Nordic Cochrane Center in Copenhagen and professor of research design and analysis at the University of Copenhagen. In 1999, a Swedish study was published in the Swedish Medical Journal in Swedish by two people who said we cannot see that mammography screening, which Sweden has had for 14 years, has had any effect on breast cancer mortality. So this created a huge interest in the Danish Medical Association that asked the Danish National Board of Health, what should we believe? The randomized trials that tells us that screening works, or the Swedish observational study where they can't see any effect? So that was a hot potato that immediately landed in my lap. So people wanted me to review the randomized trials. And there were votings in Parliament 5 weeks away only about should Denmark have mammography screening in the whole country. We only had screening in 20% of the country. So my statistician and I worked very fast. We did a report in just 4 weeks in order to give the politicians information before the votings. And we concluded that we actually didn't know whether mammography screening did more good than harm, and we couldn't exclude the possibility that screening did more harm than good, because it found many cancers that should not have been found because they are not dangerous. This is what we call overdiagnosis. So the director of the National Board of Health now had a hot potato, and he promised us that he would send our report to the minister who was against mammography screening. It never made it from the National Board of Health to the Ministry of Health to the minister. So people voted without knowing about our damning report. And they voted for introducing screening. But politicians out in the regions in Denmark were still skeptical. And the leading politicians said, what should we now believe? We have a lot of respect for the National Board of Health that recommends screening, but we also have a lot of respect for the Nordic Cochrane Center that I direct. So what would they believe? So they refused to introduce screening despite a parliamentary vote. So for the next 17 years, we still only had screening in 20% of the country. This enabled us to compare screened regions with non-screened regions many years later. And guess what? We confirmed the Swedish results. We couldn't see any effect of mammography screening in Denmark. Breast cancer mortality went down, but in the whole country, also where we had no screening. And this coincided with the introduction of very effective treatments, chemotherapy, tamoxifen, and so on. So breast cancer mortality started to go down all over the world when effective treatments were introduced. We have looked at other countries. It has nothing to do with when screening was introduced. So we found out in just 4 weeks, 15 years ago, that mammography screening might not work. And we have done research on that ever since and can now substantiate, yes, it likely doesn't work because it doesn't reduce the incidence of advanced cancers that have spread. And this is the whole idea of screening, to find cancers before they have spread. And many international studies have shown that this doesn't happen. And we have shown that it doesn't affect breast cancer mortality in Denmark. And it actually kills quite a number of healthy women because they are overdiagnosed. They should never have, their cancer should never have been detected. But since you cannot distinguish between harmless cancers and dangerous ones in the microscope or in other ways, then you need to treat all of them. And when you treat healthy women with radiotherapy, it kills some of them. They get lung cancer and heart disease and other cancers. So if you look at total mortality, we can't see any effect of screening. If you look at total cancer mortality, remembering that radiotherapy causes cancer in healthy women, you can't see any effect whatsoever. So my conclusion is screening should be stopped because it's harmful.